right, I think we're good. Okay, I'd like to, are we live here, Matt?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, I want to call to order the December 8th meeting of the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission. We are meeting virtually via Zoom due to the COVID-19 pandemic that is ongoing. I'd like to begin our meeting with an invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm going to ask Vice Chair Cooper if he would please lead us in each of those.
Please join me. Dear Lord, please help us, each one of us, to honor each other's perspective as we deliberate the various issues before us tonight, and give us all the wisdom to make decisions that are in the best interest of our community. And especially during these trying times, protect and keep all of us safe during these holidays and into the coming year. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First item is the approval of the agenda for the December 8th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any changes or alterations that need to be made? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All right, and I think we can just do this one by voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next is the approval of the minutes of the meeting on November 10th, 2020 of the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission. The minutes have been distributed. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those? Are there any changes or corrections that need to be made to those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right.
Second.
And a second on the floor. Again, we'll do it by a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. We don't have any old business on the agenda, so we'll move into new business. Our first item, item 6.1, is going to be revision of Article 2, definitions, and Article 6, use requirements by district in the City of Johnson City zoning ordinance as it relates to the MX1 mixed-use neighborhood district.
Thank you, Dr. Wild. So I'm going to run through this. As you are used to, the language that's proposed is in green and underlined, and anything that's been struck through or is to be removed is struck through and colored in red. And so to start off, we've included a definition for accessory dwelling units. This will come up later in the permitted uses, but we're defining it here so that it's clearly understood what it is and how it's distinguished from any other type of dwelling unit. These are, subordinate and accessory to principal dwelling units. We also have a clarification on, we're including animal hospitals as a proposed permitted use in the MX1. We needed to clean up that definition. And then we're also, we've used the term church throughout the zoning code. And so we will be looking to move that to a term religious institution. And so we're adding that definition here as well. And that's one of the permitted uses in the MX1 that's proposed as well. The intent has a few modifications to the explanation of the intent for the MX1 neighborhood. Initially, it appears that this zoning district was created for larger greenfield development. And as we look to implement the goals of the comprehensive plan and some of the to accommodate some of the market demands and in response to state law changes that no longer allow the city to just go out and annex at will, we need to look for opportunities for infill development. And so this existing zoning district is well written for application for infill development, but in the intent, we needed to make that clear. And so we've added some language there. Along the same lines with state law, the state of Tennessee has prohibited inclusionary zoning, meaning that you cannot require that a percentage of a development include a certain percentage of affordable housing. And so that was part of this zoning district as well, is that it included a provision that 20% of the housing would be affordable housing. So we've struck that language to be compliant with the state law. If that ever changes, it could be reapplied. Moving into the proposed permitted uses, this would be a mixed use neighborhood, meaning that it would allow residential uses. We've got 2-family and multifamily residential dwellings, not to exceed 1.5 times the density of developed property, excluding non-residential and undeveloped parcels within a 1,000-foot radius of the property line of the proposed development. At no time will the residential density exceed 14 units per acre. So in your staff report, you saw that we did an example of this. It is done in conjunction with GIS, where they create a radius. They tell us the number of units that are within that radius. They tell us the land area that's within that radius. And then we can calculate the units per acre from that very quickly. We then multiply that times 1.5. That is done to ensure compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood as far as the level of intensity and the level of density. And then it caps it at 14 units per acre. And so that's equivalent to R4 zoning. So that is the residential component of permitted uses. Daycare is currently a permitted use. It would remain. This language has been added to align with the recent changes to daycares in our zoning code. And so it has the updated definitions and refers to the correct subsections that have been updated. So that's simply an update, not a change of use. Nursing homes, that stays the same. Under non-residential or commercial uses, we have not changed. There's a maximum square footage of 2,000 square feet. We are proposing to exclude the areas that are outside. Patios, porches, decks would be excluded from that number, so it doesn't count against that square footage. So again, that maximum square footage is intentional to ensure compatibility as we introduce commercial uses in a mixed use district, and maybe as a transition from a higher intensity commercial area to a low density neighborhood. We want to make sure that we have compatibility. And so those, by capping at 2,000 square feet, we ensure that we're not going to have large scale big box or even like a corner, general pharmacy store in these areas. This would be very small. Offices, small general and specialty retail services, cultural uses, government buildings and uses. And then we've proposed to add the following uses to this. And much of this was pulled from our existing B1 neighborhood business district and our bridge plan or comprehensive plan, our existing comprehensive plan, which has a whole section on neighborhood business districts. And so we use those two as guides. Those are both adopted. One is a zoning code, one is our guiding document from our comprehensive plan. And so this list of uses was developed using that. We did not take all of B1 and associate with MX1 because there's certain uses in the B1 that seemed a little incompatible. And we may want to revisit the B1 as a follow-up to this to make sure that our B1 neighborhood business district is also a well-written code as well. But just going through this, animal hospitals, bakeries, bed and breakfast, homes and inns, these are all defined in the zoning code. One change from the committee meeting, we had restaurants with optional outdoor seating and on-premise alcohol sales. So that language as a permitted use does not align with the rest of our zoning code. So staff took another look at this and said, well, restaurants allow on-premise alcohol sales as a just by right. So we don't need to restate that they can have on-premise alcohol sales. It's redundant. But then we also need to make clear that if there is something that's not a restaurant, a pub, a small neighborhood place that sells beer, then those things need to be distinguished. So beer serving / sales establishments was put in here. That's found in the West Walnut district. It's found in our B1 neighborhood business district. It's a common neighborhood use. So that's been included there. Financial institutions, laundromats, pharmacies, again, restaurants. And another change that was done, instead of the optional outdoor seating, we looked at the West Walnut district and included some language that's found there to address outdoor dining. And so we've added, for outdoor dining, an 8-foot tall masonry wall or wood fence shall be constructed between the outdoor dining area and neighboring residential uses. When architectural elements are employed for screening, they should be the same building materials as the principal structure. So ensuring some compatibility there. The serving or consumption of food or alcohol shall not occur after 10 p.m. The West Walnut district actually caps it at 11 p.m. And we felt that for this district, we talked to some folks and felt that for neighborhood compatibility, 10 p.m. was a more appropriate time for a restaurant in that area. And then drive-throughs are prohibited. So this is a neighborhood commercial district. It's not a suburban corridor type of use or type of area. And so that's what we've come up with. That is new since the committee. And so welcome discussion on those provisions, but that was just a little bit of a tweaking. So what would happen is this would just go away, and that's what you would be left with. But I wanted to show you that at first, just so those committee members who are involved in the discussion on December 2nd were aware that there's been some additional changes. As I mentioned earlier, accessory dwelling units is something that we've defined. We have included accessory dwelling units as a part of a permitted use with a residential use. That is already allowed or permitted within the MX zoning district. It makes sense to include it if we can have multifamily up to 14 units per acre or 1.5 times the density within 1,000 foot radius, then it certainly makes sense that a single family home could have an accessory dwelling unit in the same area. That intensity of use would not be out of line with the other uses that are proposed for such a district. Under customary incidental home occupations, all this language in red is already in our code. So there was no need to restate it. If we make changes to a home occupation provision in Article 4, then it would apply here as well, rather than us having to make those changes in 2 places. So this is really about having a cleaner working zoning code. And then we've included live work units, which was defined and included in recent changes to the B2, which included provisions for first floor residential in our central business district. And so that's a newly defined type of dwelling unit and mixed use development pattern that we've included here. And then again, the religious institutions that I mentioned earlier. So that is the section on permitted uses. Are there any questions at this time?
Matt, what was our rationale for changing to 10 p.m. When we have 11 p.m. on Walnut Street backing up to the streets?
Yeah, the WWD, if you look at the permitted uses in that district, it is despite being adjacent to a neighborhood, it is has a much greater level of intensity in its list of permitted uses. You can do a whole lot more in the WWD than we have listed in the MX1. And so we distinguish that, we've made that distinction, that we're talking about a lower level of intensity in general. And so to be good neighbors and have a zoning district that works, we felt like lowering it to 10 p.m. was more reasonable.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions on permitted uses? Okay, area regulations. The standards here, A through we're gonna have to change the lettering, whatever it is, L, previously L, covered more than setbacks. And so it previously was subtitled setback requirements, but it's really setbacks and development standards. And so in the MX1, there are no setbacks other than the drainage and utility easement. Garages have to be 25 feet, front facing garages. That's found throughout our code. There's no minimum lot size. Buildings are required to have their primary entrance visible and accessible from the street. We are looking to strike this requirement for awnings and covered walkways. That seemed a bit out of character with our development patterns and unnecessary. Maybe that made sense if this was going to be a 2-acre development on the edge of town as a new little town center or something to that effect, but it doesn't really apply with infill and seems above and beyond what's necessary. Also, the requirement for impervious surface to not exceed 75%. Again, it's not compatible with infill development on small lots, the way that we would be applying this. The building height is unchanged, 35 feet, 45 for if it includes commercial. And we've struck the provision for a minimum of 2 acres. Again, trying to make this compatible for infill development. And then this requirement here that commercial space would be constructed, that the residential spaces units would be constructed before a CO was granted for commercial uses. Rather than making that a requirement of a development that really forces a mixed use development. We're not sure we're ready for that to have that strong of language to force it to be mixed use. Mixed use can be difficult from a financing standpoint, can prove challenging. There's not a lot of developers out there who necessarily have done it well or are very experienced with it. And so forcing it to happen may not work well. And so what we're proposing is that if someone proposes mixed use development, then they would need to make sure they build those residential uses along with the commercial uses. And then this provision for the total area of development not exceeding 10% of the total area, again, that doesn't work in an infill application. It only works in a greenfield application. Moving on to the site standards. Nothing here has changed. Was there a question?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Going back to item H that was struck out.
Yes.
Maximum amount of impervious not to exceed 75%. What was the rationale behind striking that?
Again, that it doesn't apply well in an infill development. So if you're in a green field and you have the ability to take raw land and develop it in a certain way, and and ensure that, you know, a certain percentage of it remains pervious. That's different than if you're in an infill type of scenario with small lots where you're going to need to, you know, provide some parking. Your footprint for your building may take up most of the land. And so there are additional provisions related to stormwater management that are found further on. And so if that's your concern, let me try to address it in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So moving on, development standards. So it talks about pedestrian systems, street design when there's new streets involved. Parking, there's a lot of flexibility with the parking. It allows for the on-street parking to count towards the total required parking. It ensures that large parking lots are not going to be on the side. You cannot have parking lots in the front. You can only be in the rear side, and if it's on the side, it can only be 25% of your required parking can be on the side. And it shall be screened as well. So again, that works well in an urban environment and maintains a strong street wall and a good pedestrian environment. Parking lot shall not abut a street intersection. You can have shared parking without going to the BZA, which is streamlines the process for a developer. Public parking and commonly owned parking within 300 feet of the site can count towards your total parking requirement. And this is another change from the committee meeting I caught today. F, in review of the pedestrian oriented nature of this district, the parking requirements for commercial uses included in subsection 6.10.2.14, which is the list that we looked at for permitted uses. And I might have to look at these numbers again, 6.10.2.24. So that refers back to these uses here. So it actually go through 6.26.2.8. Make sure I got this right. 6.10. I may have to look at this real quick offline. It refers back to subsection 5.2.3, which is our site plan section of the code. And that does not make reference to parking requirements. And so our parking requirements are found in Article 11, subsection 11.3. And so that was placed there to, if a restaurant is proposed and a restaurant has to have one space per every 100 feet of 100 square feet of gross floor area, then they come up with a total. Let's say it's a 2,000 square foot, they'd have to have 20 parking spaces. Well, this would say that would be 75. They would only be required to have 75% of that. So that would bring it down to 15 required parking spaces. 6.10. is referring to the RP district. Okay, this is interesting. For some reason, it refers out to the permitted uses found under the RP district. 6.10.2. Which doesn't exist. So that makes a reference that is also not found correctly. So both of these references are incorrect. So this subsection will also need to change. And I would propose that it just refers to the non-residential uses that are listed on 6.25.2.4. So something got changed here, 6.25.2.4. I'm looking at this right. So yeah, looks like some of the numbers are changed, but I'll make that correction. And so that's what this would be. believe that's what I said. Sorry to bog you down with changes on the fly here. 6.25.2.4. And I'll fix this in the final version, but just so you know, this will be what is intended. Is that it refers back to the commercial uses that were listed previously in this same chapter and says that the requirements that are for parking that are found in our parking ordinance would be reduced to 75%. Everybody good with that? Sorry, that was messy. Landscape regulations, the landscape regulations do apply, but it has exclusions for section 12.2 landscape yards, 12.4 buffer yards, and 12.5 protective screening. So again, provide some flexibility in our standards, and again that helps to reduce some of the development footprint that's required. It does go on to say that if you are going to propose screening and buffering, that it needs to be reflected in your comprehensive development plan, which we'll talk about in a minute, and in your concept plan. And so if a restaurant was going in and they had no required buffer, but they wanted to put a fence up, then they would need to show that in their concept plan. And of course, we do have some language in there that if they have outdoor dining, they would have to screen it anyway. Goes on to talk about some other applications of screening for docks, dumpsters, and satellite dishes, mechanical equipment. Designing, this is on the public side, designing street lighting for pedestrian scale, underground and utilities. Architecture. So this is a provision. This is a provision that exists, not being changed. This was discussed pretty thoroughly during the current land use committee meeting earlier this evening. This is the provision. Architecture. The architectural style and material shall be compatible with the residential character of the surrounding area. So if you're building commercial or multifamily, any of the permitted uses, you would have to construct it in a manner that has an architectural style and material that is deemed compatible with the residential character of the surrounding area. Of course, we have standards like this that we apply to our historic districts, our overlay districts. There are architects that are well-trained in identifying the different elements of a building that are found in an area, and then reflecting those in the style or design of a new building. And so that's what would be provided here.
So wait, Matt, hang on one second, if I could. Dr. Cooper, sorry, Commissioner Cooper, was that I believe if that was the section you were making reference to during the committee meeting, then yes, I agree wholeheartedly. That does need to be updated. There is a difference in authority between the Historic Commission and their ability to have some discretion through their process, through the Historic District Guidelines, than staff from a zoning perspective. So that 625.47 does need to be tightened up, and that's something that we will address very soon.
Yeah. So, as I stated in the committee meeting, we have been talking about architectural standards and form-based coding in other conversations about some other changes to the zoning district that I think weave into this very well. And so those conversations can be brought together to make improvements and provide more clarity on what the standards are going to be. What are the types of architectural elements that would need to be looked at by the developer, by staff in reviewing a development proposal. Those should be outlined. What are the types of materials that should be considered? So more clarity, more language that directs the developer and limit some of the discretion for staff is needed. The intent of this is to ensure some compatibility for the current residents and neighborhood. So if you have a commercial use, though it's going to be, you know, limited to 2,000 square feet, and by its very scale and by the list of permitted uses, is also going to be neighborhood friendly. There's all these elements of this zoning district that are working together to ensure compatibility with the neighborhood, and this is one of those. But making sure that the difference here would be, so if you can have 14 units per acre in an R4 zoning district, for instance, there is no compatibility standard. If you're R4, you can build your up to 14 units per acre, however, you know, you see fit, as long as it meets the building code. Under an MX1, you could have up to 14 units per acre, but there would have to be some compatibility from an architectural standpoint. The approval process is really just streamlining the process. There's a few changes here, nothing that is substantial, that would really be a major shift from what we have already. And so that you should have reviewed in your or seen in your staff report. If you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them. But the main changes, again, just briefly summarizing, are some tweaking to the list of permitted uses, and then the intent, adding a few definitions. And other than that, these are you know, some slight tweaks to an existing zoning district to make sure that it works for infill development. I'm happy to answer any questions and have the information for public hearing up here as well.
Okay, but Matt, I want to start by just letting other commissioners know that this did go through the Legislative Review Committee last week. And so we had Commissioners Aldridge and Whitfield and I present in that meeting. And we did have some hearty discussion, particularly about the permitted uses. Once Matt explained the intent of this MX1 zoning. And so we tried to consider it from a perspective of what types of businesses might we want to see adjacent to our neighborhood, something that we could potentially walk to, something that we could potentially use. And I think that was kind of the lens that we looked at it from. So I want to start by asking if anybody has any questions of Matt or Preston at this time about this item.
Madam Chair, if it's okay, before we jump into Q&A, I wanted to provide a little explanation as to the order of the agenda tonight, only because this is very thick, heavy information to be received on the front of the agenda. And I've received, just even during the presentation, a couple of emails or communications virtually from folks saying, why is this not at the end of the agenda? This needed to be presented first and up front before the rezoning conversation. We believe that we have quite a few folks, there may not be, but we have fielded a number of phone calls on the rezoning, both for and in opposition. We also had a number of folks show up at the neighborhood meeting. So we believe there is going to be quite an engagement on the rezoning piece. But before we had the conversation on the rezoning piece, Matt and I both agreed that it was important to bring the text to you so that you as a board were able to grasp what was the intent of the MX1 as a district and the standards and what were our proposed changes, so that you could be thinking about that as you think of the rezoning. So realized that it seemed a little heavy and thick to be having this conversation at the very front of the meeting, but there was method to our madness. So I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. With that said, Preston, may I ask, should we move, when we do move on to the rezoning, should we hear comments from the public that make us want to potentially change some of the things we've addressed in this item? Would there be an opportunity to go back to this item, or could we potentially take this item now, and now that it's been introduced and we see it, move it further down in the agenda so that we could hear some of the public comments related to the rezoning and then address this again? What would be the advice?
Yeah, actually, your latter suggestion, and even seeing Matt's head nod, is not a bad idea. I mean, now that you've received the presentation, you could move this item. The only thing I would caution, and it's really less of a caution, more of a suggestion, is be careful not to apply the MX1 standards that Matt has presented mentally to just the rezoning. That's important, because the MX1 standards that both exist and the changes we are proposing would apply to all MX1, not just this particular area. So remember that that's an important part of the conversation.
Okay.
Do we want to check before any decisions made on tabling with Wendy to see if there's anyone who wanted to speak on this so that they don't have to wait? You could have the public hearing now, or and then continue the public. You don't have to close the public hearing. You could keep it open. But I don't want anyone who wants to make a comment on this to have to wait till the end of the meeting if you decide to table it.
I do have one caller, I'm assuming, for this item.
Yeah. Hey, Wendy, can you verify that they are calling about the text amendment and not the rezoning?
I can't until I let him in, and you all have to ask.
Okay.
I can put him back in the waiting room if he is for another item.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's verify.
Have one. Caller, can you identify yourself, please?
Yeah. Hey, Wendy, can you verify that they are calling about the text amendment?
Caller, if you could turn your volume off on the computer and only respond to the phone.
Yeah. Let's verify.
Caller, can you identify yourself, please?
Yeah.
Caller, are you there? Volume on the computer and only respond to the phone.
Wendy, it doesn't look like it's gonna work, but they may catch up and they can try to chime in later.
Okay, I'll put him back in the waiting room.
Can you mute them and could you leave them in and mute them? So they could hear it in real time.
I can, but if they're not listening on the phone, I
That's
can
good.
allow them back in and mute them if you want.
Okay, so I want to hear from the other commissioners whether you agree on my suggestion to table this item to later in the meeting, or if you all would prefer to go ahead and discuss it now. And then if there is agreement, I do need a motion to be able to table it and move it further down.
That's correct. Nicole could verify.
I move that we table the discussion until the end of our agenda.
Second.
End of new business.
Yes, thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. I believe we can do this one by voice vote. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, then we're going to move discussion on item 6.1 down past discussion on item 6.5. So this will become 6.6, I guess. All right, with that in mind, we are going to move on to the second item under our new business. And that is rezoning number 1067, the Mountain Home Neighborhood Area Rezoning Phase 1.
Just a second here to wrap up
Okay,
the last one. Everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
we can.
Okay. So as mentioned, we have a area rezoning for the Mountain Home neighborhood, a portion of the Mountain Home neighborhood, to rezone certain parcels from R4 and I2 to R2, B3, and MX1. It includes 20 parcels in total. The current zoning is shown on your left. You can see the R4 zoning, the I2 zoning in purple, and then the surrounding zoning districts as well. There's an existing MX1 zoning district in here already. You can also see the design overlay boundary running parallel to state of Franklin. On the right, you have the areas in the parcels proposed for the rezoning and labeled appropriately. The current land uses in the area, as shown on the left, show a wide range of uses that are currently in that area. On the right, you see our future land use map, which proposes this area to be residential, which includes both single family and multifamily. Is a very broad brush map of future land uses. As was mentioned, the current land use committee met earlier this evening, and it was pointed out that when this future land use map was created, there was no Founders Park, there was no West Walnut Street district. There was no model mill. So there's been a lot of changes in this area that would kind of force us to reconsider some of this proposed land use. But the proposal for this rezoning does align with several objectives of the land use element of our comprehensive plan. And so when we're talking about aligning with comprehensive plan, it's not just the map, it's also the text of our comprehensive plan. And this proposal is in line with the comprehensive plan. Looking at the big picture, you can see the relationship between this area, the proposed rezonings, and how they relate to downtown, Founders Park, the WWD, even the extension of the B3 and B2 along West Main and Market. You can see how Watauga Avenue is a connection. It's an arterial street that connects between State of Franklin and Main and Market. And you have an intersection here of an arterial and a collector. We have also looked at the rest of Watauga Avenue as well, but that would be considered under a second phase of potential rezonings, depending on the receptiveness of this discussion. And so just to recap, we've got an intersection of a arterial and collector. We have close proximity to downtown and the West Walnut district. We have an area that is primed for reinvestment due to these transformative projects that are around the edges. And there really is just a beautiful view of the city and of the mountains in the distance from this area. And I've got some photos that reflect that. You've got this relationship between the edge, one side of the neighborhood, and Founders Park. You can see it both during the day and at night. And then you can see images from the park up to the neighborhood. And there's a really strong relationship there that was once tobacco warehouses and food supply warehouses, and has completely changed in character over the last few years. You also have this relationship with the West Walnut Street district, in particular Model Mill, just outstanding views there with Buffalo Mountain in the distance. As you move further down Whitney Street and Watauga Avenue, you continue to have these great views. So this is a very special part of our city that we're considering for this rezoning. As was mentioned, the MX1 zoning district has a provision for new development meeting the residential character and materials of the surrounding neighborhood. So these photos were taken as examples. A lot of turn of the century homes, traditional bungalows, Victorians, four squares, that type of architecture found throughout this neighborhood. It's a beautiful historic neighborhood. And so maintaining that character would be really important to this area. Currently, there is no design standards. It's zoned, much of it is zoned R4, and by rezoning it to MX1, the density level would not change, but there would be this added provision for compatibility with residential character. There is some multifamily that exists today. The photo on the left shows the type of development, and on the right that's permitted under R4. And again, if this was to be rezoned, if parcels were to be rezoned to the MX1 in particular, that design standard provision would ensure that it is more compatible with the neighborhood than, say, the picture on the left, where it does not interface with the street. It's not oriented towards the neighborhood at all. And so that's permissible under R4, but would not be under the MX1. There are also some small commercial structures in this neighborhood. The one on the right is included in the MX1 proposal. The one on the left is in the mid block on Lamont Street, is not included in this provision. The owner of this property does have interest in rezoning being considered. It was late in this process that we got that request, and we felt that it being mid block was kind of out of line with what we've been proposing to keep the mixed use on the edges of the neighborhood, oriented towards the higher traffic streets and oriented towards the downtown Founders Park side. And so to go into some of the details, there is no development proposed. So there is no concept plan, but any development that it did occur in the or on the properties that had proposed for rezoning would have to meet the underlying zoning district and or the overlay district. And so we know that the proposed districts are MX1 and then B3 and R2. And so under the MX1, there's a residential component. The maximum density would be either 1.5 times the density of the residential development within a 1,000-foot radius of the proposed development site, and not to exceed 14 units per acre. 14 units per acre is equivalent to our current R4 zoning. In this particular area, we did an analysis of a 1,000-foot radius, which included University Edge apartments and Watauga Square apartments. So that really bumped up the numbers. And with 45.67 acres and 505 residential units, it came out to 11.05 units per acre. That gets multiplied times 1.5 and comes out to 16.5 units per acre. Well, that exceeds the 14 units per acre mark. So it would be capped at 14 units per acre, equivalent to R4. And again, the difference with that and R4 is the architectural design standard. Similarly, for MX1 commercial, there are provisions to ensure compatibility. And one of the main ways of doing that is through the list of permitted uses. The permitted uses, which we discussed just moments ago, is what's being considered. The provision for the 2,000 square feet, and then the architectural standards also ensures that compatibility. The other properties along State of Franklin here that's proposed to be B3, this is a single parcel that is a pool and hot tub retail and service business. That would be conforming with the B3, and so that would be an appropriate rezoning from the I2, which is now outdated, given the redevelopment along this corridor. And then the R2 zoning is for the city-owned properties. R2 we associate with single family homes, but it also permits publicly owned recreational facilities. And so that will ensure that those parcels remain in use with the city in conjunction with Founders Park. And then the design overlay affects a handful of properties. I think 3 properties are in the design overlay. So if they were to redevelop in commercial and multifamily, they would have additional design standards applied to them. So again, in closing, 20 parcels. In total, we have 3 that are proposed to be R2, 1 that would be B3, and then the remaining 16 are proposed to be rezoned to MX1. And staff is recommending approval of this area rezoning. Are there any questions? Preston, is there anything you wanted to add?
Sorry, I needed to unmute there. No, I think your presentation was spot on. What I would, in other words, I don't have anything to add from the presentation perspective. I would just add that as was presented to the committee in the very beginning, and then there was an update provided as well. Staff realizes the significance of this rezoning, the impact of this rezoning, the scale of the rezoning. And so because of that, we felt it was important to go a little bit above and beyond with our outreach to the community. And so as we suggested to you and really asked your permission back in September that we hold a neighborhood meeting, and we wanted to do it COVID friendly, or I should say COVID safe, and did not want to have a meeting here in City Hall. We rented a tent and had a tent erected in the parking lot at Founders Park, and bought a big jug of coffee and bought some donut holes and went out there on Saturday morning, October 24th, and had a neighborhood meeting from 9 a.m. until noon, and mailed postcards to everyone within the study area. And I want to clarify, because I received a phone call from a resident, and it was an excellent question. For that neighborhood meeting, we mailed postcards to both property owners and residents, because we wanted to make sure that we had input from not just the property owners, but from tenants as well in the rental owned properties, or rental occupied properties. So I did get that confirmation if that lady is listening or watching. You know, because of COVID, and there was also a threat of rain that day, we didn't have a huge turnout, but we had about a half dozen or just a few more. And folks came down and looked at the maps, looked at the proposal, asked all the questions that came to them, and you know, we certainly did everything we could to try to help. So we were glad and wanted to provide that outreach, and that was again back in October, so long before tonight's meeting. So we would argue that there's been quite a bit of work leading up to tonight's meeting, not only from a staff and study perspective and our analysis, but outreach as well.
I have a question. Go ahead.
Bob.
No, go ahead, Chris.
Regarding the architectural standard that's mentioned for an MX1 zoning, is that an objective standard or a subjective standard, given the variety of structures in this area, in this neighborhood?
Given my work with design standards and architectural review, I believe it can be objective. When you talk about architectural style, you are taking an inventory of the existing architectural features that are present in the neighborhood. when you talk about architect, you talk about the materials, you're talking about an inventory of the materials that are found in a neighborhood. Where it could be subjective is if you had maybe some outlying types of materials or outlier architectural styles. But what I think could be done, and this I think reflected in some of my pictures I took, there are repetitive majority critical mass of certain styles and materials found in this particular neighborhood that make it obvious. If you were to, in this, anytime a city or municipality sets out to create a set of design standards for a neighborhood, there's a process for that. It's very objective. You go out, you take an inventory of what is present, and then you create design standards based off of that analysis. And so it would be up to staff to do that on a case-by-case basis to some degree. Go out, look at the neighborhood, survey the architectural styles, survey the materials, work with the developer to make sure they understand it. That developer, in most cases, is working with professionals, architects, engineers that can help with that, builders who understand that. And so you have to have that conversation. And in my opinion, that may be different. There may be a higher standard than what we're used to. But in my opinion, I believe it is necessary to ensure compatibility. Can the code be written better? Surely it can be updated to provide more clarity. But at this point, it is the way it is, and at this point, it's a provision that protects the neighborhood. And so I wouldn't want to see this taken off course to address that at this point. I believe that protection would be it'd be appropriate for it to stay in. It'd be appropriate to be applied to this area rezoning. And then if a more sophisticated provision needs to be adopted in the future, then that can be done at that time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt, a couple of questions. The 45 acres, is that the whole area, including public streets? I guess
45 acres.
That
is the 45.67 is the total land area of the parcels that are within or touching the 1,000-foot radius of, I believe it's 202 Highland. So for this hypothetical example, we picked one vacant property and ran the analysis. So we were essentially 202 Highland is right, center west of this study area. It's a vacant parcel, and so we picked that hypothetically as to what kind of density could be put on that particular parcel, so that we could run this analysis. The analysis is already in the code. It's already part of the MX1 provisions for residential density.
Well, where I'm coming from is that I'm caught off guard by the 11 units per acre, because if you drive through that neighborhood, you don't see anywhere near that density.
Correct. And that's why there's a cap on it. So the 11, it really gets bumped up because vacant land and non-residential land is not counted because it doesn't have any dwelling units. So the only land that's included in that analysis is residential property, so that you're doing an analysis that reflects the residential densities. And so when you, in this particular case, do a radius, you are excluding the cemetery, you're excluding Founders Park, you're excluding all the commercial in Walnut District. Would actually, all of that would have normally is within 1,000-foot radius, but is not included in this analysis. So those are excluded. Included is University Edge Apartments and Watauga Square Apartments, which are both high density versus, as you mentioned, the low density that's prevalent, or the medium density that's prevalent throughout the neighborhood, small lot mix of single family and multifamily. And so this is a great example where the total comes out to 11.5, that gets multiplied, and then it exceeds the maximum density. So the maximum density is 14 units per acre. And so I think this is actually a really great example where the code really works beautifully to ensure some compatibility. And we also have to remember that the properties that are being rezoned or proposed to be rezoned are R4. So they're allowed a maximum of 14 units per acre right now. And so nothing changes in terms of density because of what is found within that 1,000-foot radius.
Thanks. Oh, the other question I had was how do we handle when a given parcel just partially falls within the design overlay?
It's included. If
The whole
any part of a
parcel
parcel touches, it's included.
The whole parcel is under the overlay.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that only applies to commercial and multifamily development.
It's like tennis. If the ball touches the line, it's in.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's actually how this 1,000-foot radius was applied as well, just like tennis. I mean, exactly like tennis.
All right.
Thanks.
Are there other questions of staff at this time? All right, I'm going to ask that we go ahead and put up the information for the public hearing again. I know it was displayed and potentially we have some callers already on the line. We can continue discussion if there aren't callers on the line, but I want to open the public hearing for anyone who wishes to express any ideas whatsoever. They can be in support, in opposition, questions, or anything else about this matter. Wendy, do we have callers on the line at this time?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, well, we'll keep discussing amongst ourselves then, but please let me know when we do get a caller and we'll go ahead and allow them to speak.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so other comments. I have a question for you, Matt and Preston. I know that we're not going to formally address the MX1 district until later on in the meeting by my request. But one of the things you cautioned us about was don't, when we get to that, only consider it in the context of this neighborhood. Could you give me some other examples of where in the city we may potentially see this type of zoning used?
Sure. Actually, the answer also partly goes back to Dr. Whitfield's question about impervious area. It's interesting. The MX1 really is best applied on the outer edges, the outer ring of downtown. That doesn't mean that it's prohibited from being located out in the suburban areas. For example, out in a suburban area, you might have a natural neighborhood node that has developed on its own between 2 or 3 neighborhoods at the intersection of a collector street or an intersection of just two busy roads on the margins of several different neighborhoods. Sometimes you'll have these kind of natural neighborhood nodes develop. Sometimes people will open a little hair salon there or a boutique of some kind. In a situation like that, that's a perfect setting for the MX1. But generally, you're going to find the MX1 in and around the B3. It'll be sharing some of the margins of the B3, which is intended to be the outer ring of the downtown. Also, as Matt noted in his presentation, the MX1 is really intended for small parcels. This is intended for small lots of land, not intended for development of manufacturing or warehousing or storage or distribution, or even something large enough that would accommodate a Walgreens or a CVS. Typically, a Walgreens or a CVS is around 16,000 square feet. For example, the Walgreens out near me on Broadway, that's a great location because it serves all of Oak Park. It serves Carnegie. But when you're getting into building sizes and nodes that are that large there at the intersection of Watauga and Broadway, you're really getting into what's called community scale, and you're getting outside of neighborhood scale. The MX1 is intended for neighborhood scale, for that walkable scale. Somebody can just walk out the street to go down and get a bagel and get a cup of coffee. The community scale is the Walgreens scale. And then you get into what's called regional scale or citywide scale. That's what you find along the state of Franklin, things like that. Does that make sense? Kind of builds up in rings.
Yep.
It does. That helps. Thank you.
We have a caller on the line.
Okay, let's go ahead and ask the caller to identify themselves, please, and we'd be more than happy to hear your thoughts on this.
Caller, can you identify yourself, please?
Do what now?
Can you identify yourself and what item you're here for?
Okay, yeah, my name is James Blevins. I own the property on the corner of 201 Lamont Full to Whitney on the rezoning to MX1.
Okay. And is that your address as well, Mr. Blevins, 201
No,
Lamont?
no, I own both the properties, but I live at Nunley Street in Johnson City.
Do we need his address for that location, Wendy, for the record?
Do what now?
I would.
Can you give me your address on Nunley Street for our public,
It's
for our record, please?
516 Nunley Drive.
Thank you. All right.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Do you mind using your pointer? Mr. Blevins, he was one of the gentlemen who came to the neighborhood meeting in October, and he owns, there you go, thank you. That's Mr. Blevins' piece right there.
There's two structures on a single parcel there. But yeah, go ahead, Mr. Blevins, tell us, you can make your comments in the public hearing.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm all for it because I think it's a good idea right there in that area. I mean, it's already, some of it, you got commercial all around us anyway, so I think it would be a perfect place. Plus it'd bring in more revenue for the city.
Okay, so you are in support of this.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else you wanted to let us know?
That's it. I think that'll do.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We do appreciate your time
All right.
calling in.
All right, thank you.
All right. Wendy, are there other callers on the line?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Well, again, we'll keep the public hearing open for just a few more minutes in case anyone else does want to call in on this. And we'll continue discussion amongst the commissioners until we formally close the public hearing.
Chairman Wild, I'd like to make a motion to approve the zoning change as presented by staff.
Okay, let me check with Wendy just one more time. We do not have any additional callers, Wendy?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then let's formally close the public hearing and then, yes, I'll accept Commissioner Whitfield's motion to approve the rezoning of number 1067 of Mountain Home Neighborhood, Phase 1 as presented by staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and I have multiple seconds. I heard Commissioner Cooper and somebody else.
Dagenhart.
All right, is there any additional discussion amongst commissioners before we take a vote? All right, hearing none, Nicole, would you please call the roll?
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved as presented.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on our agenda under new business, the next item is going to be a final plat. It's a request for final plat approval of Chestnut Cove, Phase 1. Tongue twister there.
Hang on, Whitney, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
I think it's my earphones.
Mm.
Okay, let me share the screen again. Okay, can still hear me? Can still see the screen?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. I'll just turn you guys up. Okay. So, like I said that you did not hear. It's a pretty straightforward request, but we will get to some issues towards the end. They were somewhat talked about in your staff report, but there has been new things that happened in a week, so we'll go over those. Just to give you a, let's see, I really want this to do this. But there we go. All right, just to give you a location, this is on Boone Station Road. It's about a quarter of a mile between Sailor Road and then where Shadden Road and Highland Church Road come together. This would have been before you earlier in this year as, I believe, a concept plan for you guys. We're only talking about phase 1 of it, which is 39 acres and 87 lots. And this is in your packet. If you're playing along at home and want to click the link and pull up a map of it that might be a little more clear, that's also very achievable. But this shows the layout of the concept plan that was approved. The one thing to note is something that we talked about, something we mentioned in the staff report about phasing, is that there are 2 zoning districts with this. And where that yellow comes in is where the zoning boundary essentially lies. I will want to make this very brief so that those who need to speak, like engineering, I think Preston probably has some comments on this, can, and water and sewer. So staff is recommending a conditional approval. These top 2 things apply to whatever may happen later, which would be that the street names need to be approved by addressing, and that lot corner pins need to be inspected. And I think that's a comment that may have come up with water and sewer. But here's the thing. I'm going to go back a little bit. The Cove Drive, what is Cove Drive on this map, that has pavement and sidewalk and curb and gutter. But Brummett Court, which is in the yellow area, does not. So the applicant or the engineer may want to speak to that, as well as how we might want to go about it. Staff would recommend at this point it being in 2 phases so that construction and lot sales can continue in this section 1, while everything that needs to happen in section 2 can finish up and come to you as a separate phase. Like I said, that's part of the staff report comments. Preston, do you have anything you want to add? Because we want to explain a little bit more about what the bond looks like, depending on which way everything goes.
Sure, I'll be happy to. Thank you, ma'am. So really, your presentation was excellent. I'm just going to add a little bit of information based on kind of what's happened in the last 24 hours or so. So the developer indicated that, well, and it was a true statement. They were doing everything they could to finish Brummett Court last week. And they just weren't not able to get the binder down, which is it's the first course of asphalt, pardon me. That first course of asphalt on a road, in addition to the curb and gutter, must be completed before the final plat can be approved. So in an effort to help this developer, knowing that the bulk of this phase has been completed, we went ahead and continued this on the agenda, brought it to you with the expectation that Brummett Court would have been completed by today. We had weather issues, and then today they were actually hoping to be able to pave and finish the curb and gutter today. But we all know that it was in the 30s out there today. You cannot pave when it's really below 40, 45 degrees. Now, sadly, the rest of the week, I mean, it's going to be great actually, but the rest of the week is perfect for paving, but that's after tonight. So what was written in your staff report now, unfortunately, needs to come into play. And that is the request that you split the plat into 2 sections. But here's what we would ask or suggest that the commission consider in how to address Brummett Court. Rather than, and I'm going to show you some photographs, rather than having Brummett Court be pushed all the way to the January meeting, we want to ask you one of 2 things, to consider one of 2 things. Knowing that they will be able to finish the first level of asphalt and curb and gutter this week, would the commission be willing to take advantage of this virtual medium that we have here, the ability to meet relatively easily? And would the commission be willing to come together, a quorum, first of next week, and have this be the only item on the agenda to address either section 2 or the entire plat? If that was available to the commission, and if Chairwoman Wild and others were in agreement to that, then that's something we could do, and that would help the developer keep moving forward, but at the same time meeting all the requirements of the subdivision regulations. The other option is if the Planning Commission would be willing to grant a variance to your own subregs that would allow the plat to be approved, not recorded, but to be approved by you this evening, with recognition that there is a significant bond in place, and that bond will be there whether you approve the entire plat in a week from now or you do it tonight with a variance to your subregs. But you either could grant a variance to your subregs or you withhold acting on section 2 or the entire thing until next week. But either way, we are confident that they will be finished with that. So Whitney, can I show those photographs from this afternoon? Will you? Thank you. So allow me to share my screen here for the benefit of the commission. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to go to presentation mode. Again, can everyone see my screen? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to bring everybody back so that I can see you and what I'm doing. Thank you. This is Boone Station Road. I wanted to point out here on the right-hand side of the screen, this is the sewer extension project. This is ongoing. This is part of the provision of services that are being extended in a westerly direction, and part of some of the comments that were provided to you in the staff report regarding water and sewer. This is on the left-hand side of the screen. These are the new lots that are proposed along Boone Station Road. And the entrance road is back here to my left. So I'll go to the next slide. Oh, forgive me, it's not coming up. I don't know if my machine is hung up. I think my machine was hung up there for a minute. Okay. Maybe I'll just do it this way. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
So here's the entrance into the development. This is the decel lane off of Boone Station Road. This is extending up onto Cove Drive. So this gives you an example of what Whitney was talking about. This is that first course of asphalt, first layer of asphalt, or it's called binder course. And then you'll see the curb and gutter is in and the sidewalks are in. This is on Cove Drive. And then as you extend further down Cove Drive, I do want to point out that this equipment is stationed out there right now. So it at least shows intent from the developer that they do intend on extending the asphalt tomorrow, because this is expensive equipment just to be sitting out there. As you crest the hill and look in a westerly direction, this is looking towards Highland Church Road. This is the Webb Living Trust property. Michael's Ridge is right over here. And this is looking at the bottom of the hill at the cul-de-sac where Cove meets up with Brummett Court. And you'll see Cove is all finished. Again, binder, curb and gutter, and sidewalk. This is at the bottom, and here's where you can see Brummett is not complete. Brummett has stone down, but Brummett does not have the binder course. Coming back up the hill, again, you see Cove, and then Brummett over here on the right. You see that they've got a lot of the curb and gutter down, and then Boone Station Road on the left. And as you're leaving Brummett Court, you'll see the stone, but not the binder. So I'll stop sharing, give it back to Whitney. The original recommendation to approve the entire plat stands. Staff is confident that this work will be finished. It's just that the developer unfortunately ran into a snag. These things happen. And so you have two options. Would you be willing to meet virtually again in about a week, or grant a variance to your subregs?
I would be in favor of meeting in a week.
Preston, to clarify, I thought I was hearing three options from you. One would be a special called meeting next week. Another would be a variance to the subdivision regs, or the third option would be a recommendation that the developer divide this into two phases. We approve phase 1 tonight, and then phase 2 comes back before us in our January meeting. Did I misunderstand, or are those?
No, you are technically correct. That is an option. So really you have four options, because I would add a fourth, and that is that if you approved section 1 tonight, which is Cove Road, Cove Drive, plus the Boone Station Road lots, but not section 2, which is Brummett Court, staff, now ultimately it's the decision of the board, but if you did just section 1 tonight, staff would encourage and or advise the board to try to come back before the January meeting to get section 2 completed, especially in light of the fact that we can meet virtually.
Okay, I think I'd like to hear from the developer if he's available or she, about how critical it is, the timing of approving the entirety of this evening or even next week.
He's on the call.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead, and if the developer is available to speak, would you please identify yourself and give us your name and address and kind of give us your thoughts about this, please?
Just 1 second, please.
Approving the entirety of this evening or even next week. On the call.
Okay, I can hear you now. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Please go ahead and identify yourself, give us your address, and we'd specifically like to know your thoughts about how critical the timing is for us to approve the entirety of this final plat this evening versus dividing this into two portions where we can approve the portion that has been completed with all the paving work tonight, and then potentially put off approval of the second portion, the Brummett Court portion, either to next week or to potentially our meeting in January.
Okay. I'm Joe Wilson. Address is 213 Willows Ridge Court, Johnson City. I'm one of the developers of Chestnut Cove. And as far as we would love for it to be approved tonight, either by a meeting next week or working to just go ahead and approve it with changing of the subregs. And that's, what else would you like for me to say? I'm sorry, I didn't hear part of that.
I guess I was just trying to better understand how critical the timing is. What is the implication of approval of the portion tonight and then putting off the approval of the Brummett Court portion for you all?
Well, 1 week we would be happy if you did it in a week. If you push it out to January, we're talking about quite a substantial amount of money that we would have to put into next year. And our goal is to try to get as many of these lots closed this year as we possibly can.
So Preston, do I understand correctly? He cannot sell the lots until we approve the final plat?
Correct.
Is that correct?
I'm not Preston, but I will answer.
Okay. So until he has final plat approval, he cannot sell any of these lots. So if
that is correct.
Okay, so approval of just phase one would only allow him to sell lots in phase one. And then he would need approval of the Brummett Court portion before those lots can be sold.
Yes.
Correct.
And the majority of our sales are on Brummett.
Okay. Okay, does anybody else have questions of the developer while we have Joe on the line?
I'm curious about what brought us to this point. The weather is the biggest concern that we've had. Okay. Here recently? We've been working on this for about 6 months. This is not, it's not by any means a short endeavor. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Joe. You can hang on the line and continue to listen to our discussion. I'll let you know if we have any additional questions of you, but I don't anticipate any now. But thank you very much for calling in and speaking with us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. Preston, do we need to open a public hearing for this matter in general? Does this require a public hearing? I can continue to listen to our discussion. I'll let you know if we have any.
Hey, oh, there we go. Thank you. You would open what's called public comment, but yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, I want to go ahead and formally open that public comment session. If we could put up the information on the screen, so in case anybody else does wish to call in, and we can continue our discussion amongst commissioners while we keep that open, just to allow time for anybody to call in. And while we're waiting, I'll just throw in my 2 cents worth. I am unavailable for any meetings next week, even in the virtual format. Unfortunately, I have vacation plans for the entire week.
I know Bob mentioned that he could meet, I could meet as well next week. Yeah, I don't know how many we have to have a quorum, but there's 2.
I cannot meet on Tuesday evening, but most any other meeting I can.
I
And
believe a quorum is 6.
Yes.
I'll just go ahead and put out there. I'm okay except for Wednesday. But could I just get a recap or a reclarification? If they have posted a bond regarding these improvements, is that, or a credit or something or anything, or no?
Not yet. The bond amount depends on kind of how this goes. But I mean, if you want to see that bond amount, I can put that up on the screen. Public Works provided that. So I believe the total amount, okay, I'm gonna let Public Works chime in here. I will misrepresent what this is. So.
well, but you were on track. You were on track to.
Yes, I think it's 192. 108 is the bond amount for all of it because of what is left on Brummett Court.
What we would be looking, this is Public Works, what we'd be looking at for a total bond if the whole subdivision were to go as one would be $364,500. That's your surface asphalt, unfinished drainage pipes, and some end walls, erosion control, and some other items. But the total bond would be $364,500. If you approve the front section, which is shown as section 1 on the plat that you saw on the screen, that would be 172,000 would be the bond that would be needed to approve a section 1 only. But you have a total needed, if you approve it as a total, of $364,500.
And is there a portion of that work that's preventing us from approving it tonight, or is it the whole amount? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
There's an amount of work, which is basically the binder that you were shown that's not down yet, that may get put down tomorrow. That's the big component. But the total amount of work that needs to be done would be in the neighborhood of $136,000 of work that's not done, that needs to be done for you to just be able to approve this without any variances or any alternatives of meeting later. That work has been held back due to weather, and I think what the developers try to tell you, it's not just weather in the last few days, although we've had snow and some other wet conditions. It's been the weather throughout the time period they've been under construction that's accumulated and put them behind schedule. So the bond amount's not necessarily what's been objectionable that I'm aware of. It's that they need to move these lots this calendar year, and having a follow-up meeting to approve the whole thing, it sounded like that was acceptable to them, as long as it's something reasonably quick. And it sounded like most of their cells were in that section where the work is not complete. I'll stop talking here with this. The subdivision regulations require a certain amount of work to be put down so that if houses are built and people begin to live in it, they're not driving on the gravel stone, or the drainage system is not working because something's missing in the drainage system. So what was considered to be the minimum for a functional neighborhood would be to have the street at least paved with the first layer and all the drainage in, the water and sewer system working also.
So
are
Alan,
we-
just so I can make sure I understand, so that bond not only includes the binding, but also the drainage and all that that they have not completed yet. Is that correct?
No, the 364,500 would be the bond for the stuff that is allowed to be bonded. If we give variances and approve it with the variance that this work does not need to be finished, then we need to add an additional $136,500. That's the work, the cost of the work that is not allowed to be bonded right now. So could you add the 136 to this?
So,
We're going to
Sorry.
add the 136 to the 364, give you that number here real quick. That total bond, if you gave variances, the total bond would be 501,000. Probably round that off to 500,000.
so upon our approval tonight, you could do that bond. Is that correct?
Yes, if you approve the whole thing tonight with variances for the work that's not usually allowed to be unfinished, your total bond would be in the $500,000 range. That would be all unfinished work.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, just from my perspective, I have no problem trying to make a special meeting next week, if that's the overwhelming consensus. But given with our approval that we could bond, that the Public Works Department could bond that additional amount that's unfinished, I guess unless there's a compelling reason otherwise that I haven't heard, my leaning would be just to go ahead and grant the approval tonight. But again, I'm open to maybe something I haven't understood.
Commissioner Mays, are you saying that condition the bond upon the bond, the additional bond amount?
Well, I think my understanding from Public Works is that it has to be, we have to grant that variance under the subdivision regulations before they can bond out that additional amount. But once we do that, they can bond that out. Is that correct?
That would be my understanding.
Yes.
And
So I
if you
think
are
that protects the city. So
if you are leaning that direction, I would also probably add the section of the ordinance that you're varying, the subdivision ordinance that you're varying from. And that is 3-2.445 14.1. I don't know if I've written that all right. It's
I can pull it up and I can
I've got
put
it.
Screen. Oh,
I've got it,
Okay.
but I don't want to. I can't pull it up right now.
Yeah. Well, Wendy's got control of the screen.
Okay, well, Wendy, is there anybody else on the line that wanted to call in for the public hearing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, let's go ahead and formally close the public hearing. That'll take care of that issue.
Chairwoman Wild, I would ask if we could ask the applicant if that solution is acceptable.
Is Joe still on the line, Wendy?
He is. He's muted. If you can unmute yourself, Joe.
Joe, can you hear me, Joe?
He's not unmuted yet.
Can he hear me?
He should be able to, yes.
Okay, Joe, one of the potential things we're discussing would be to grant a variance which would allow us to bond the additional work that normally would not be included in a bond. And that would require you putting up a $500,000 bond for us to approve both sections tonight. If we decide to go that route, would that be acceptable to you?
So, Madam Chair, if I obviously cannot speak for the developer, but he is simply seeking approval tonight. He knows that there is a bond required for this project regardless. So I think that the commission would be appropriate in voting in that. Chair, I obviously cannot speak.
Joe, if you can turn the volume down on the computer and just listen to the headset.
He knows that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Joe, did you hear that?
Yes.
Chairwoman
Question. Yes, we are in agreement to move forward. If you were to approve the development tonight, we would be in a position to move forward with the bond.
So I'll go ahead and, if it's okay, I think we've closed, haven't we?
We have closed the public hearing.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve both sections tonight. And Whitney, if you can correct me as to the variance language that I need to include in that.
To vary from subdivision ordinance 3-2.4.5 14.1.
And I
So
will second
moved.
that.
I think that would also be a variance to 14.2. 14.1 is the road binder, and 14.2 includes the drainage system.
Yeah.
And we have items in both of those areas
Okay.
that are incomplete.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there discussion?
My only concern is, are we setting any kind of precedent here?
That was exactly going to be my question and mine. I want to be as developer friendly as we possibly can be, but this is something that I have not seen in my 4 years of service on this board. And so by doing this, are we opening a potential can of worms? Because I think if we do this tonight for this developer, we have to be amenable to doing this for similar requests in the future. And is that going to be problematic?
Weather is a part of construction and development, and it has been forever, and it will be forever.
Okay. Is there other discussion?
So
Yeah, I made the motion, so I guess I probably need to say something. But from my vantage point, I know that given what we've heard from Public Works, I think there's a lot of protection from the city standpoint in that they're going to be able to bond this additional amount and the unfinished improvements. So while I do understand the concern about setting precedent, the decision ultimately, it's kind of like a BZA. For a BZA, they grant a variance, but ultimately that discretion is going to remain with the BZA on a case-by-case situation. And personally, from my standpoint, any developer that comes that is kind of in a similar situation as this, I'm going to be sympathetic to all of them. And from my vantage point, if we're talking about a week, less than a week away from completing the work that we're talking about, then that's a good enough reason to kind of move forward. So I guess that's my 2 cents that I'll chime in with.
Okay.
Commissioner Whitfield, I just wanted to go back to Public Works if we could. And I just wanted to see, I appreciate Alan's input on this. I guess one question I'd have is Public Works comfortable with this?
Normally, it would be hard to be comfortable, but when we see the equipment already on site, ready to do the work, it gives us a lot of confidence that we're not going to be out on a limb. Plus, you're going to include the additional $136,000 for those items that we don't normally bond into the bond. That gives us a second degree of comfort. So given those two things, we're okay with it. The other aspect I might ask Preston is, do we want to ask that this approval include a reduction in the bond if, for instance, they are able to finish that $136,000 in the next few days before they pick up the signed plat? That if the board would give us the ability to reduce the bond to the amount of the work unfinished at that time.
Yes, I would recommend that to be part of the motion. The other part to consider for the board is that in the staff report, you may note that there is a recommendation that the pins, that the corner pins, the property pins be installed prior to recordation. That dollar amount too has been included in the bond. But it is important, at least from water and sewer, and I know Travis is on the call, so I don't want to speak for Travis, but we understand the importance of having the pins in place prior to recordation. Again, once the plat is recorded, the developer is able to start selling lots. We understand based on this call, he's got potential contracts already lined up. So he's got people waiting. And so it's important that water and sewer have those pins in order to identify clearly where the lots are in relation to their water meters and sewer cleanouts. So the plat, even if you approve it tonight based on the way that Commissioner Mays has made the recommendation or made the motion, it still won't be recorded in a matter of, it won't be recorded tomorrow. They will, if it's approved the way you have moved, then it could be paved, finished up on Brummett Court, pins installed, and then the bond submitted, and then appropriately reduced as the work is completed. Does that make sense?
Alan, does the bond, the 500,000 cover, protect the city from everything that's left to be done that would appropriate for our normal approval process?
Yes, that's a list of things that, such as the pins you just talked about. It includes final drawings such as record or as-built drawings that are required. It includes some erosion control that has to continue even after you finished everything. We got to have a stand of grass. And so eventually he could ask for a bond reduction, and maybe the only thing left in it is getting grass established, for example. It includes all these things.
Thank you.
Before we take a vote, I would just say I would be more comfortable seeing this divided into a phase 1 and phase 2 and approving the portion that is complete. I'm very sympathetic to the developer, and especially hearing that potentially there's more interest in the lots in phase 2, but I'm concerned about the precedent that we may be setting. That's just.
Commissioner Wild, why don't you see how many commissioners can meet next week, and see if we're going to have a quorum. If we are, it seems like then the logical way to do this is just go ahead and have the meeting next week so that we can approve the whole thing.
Okay, I think that's an excellent suggestion. So I know we have a motion and a second on the floor, but before we take a vote on it, how many commissioners would be available to meet next week? Why don't we do it by show of hands, like literally pick your hand up and we'll see.
I think some of them though had mentioned they can, but certain days they cannot.
We are going to have some. Okay, maybe we should do it this way then. How many commissioners would be unavailable to meet next week at all? Okay, I'm the only one. I'm only seeing my own hand. I don't know if there's anybody else. So that would leave 5 more potential commissioners on this call. We're missing, what, Commissioner Pavlich tonight? Is that the only other one? So unless he can meet and we could find a time that would be acceptable to the remaining 5 commissioners, that would be the only way that it could potentially be approved next week.
Yeah, I can meet next week, but I'm unavailable and I already have obligations Tuesday and Wednesday evening.
Well, we've already heard no Tuesday, no Wednesday.
And Thursday is city commission.
So no Thursday.
Keep in
Monday
mind
evening.
too,
Monday evening is agenda review for commission as well.
No Monday.
well, if it's okay, keep in mind that because this would be deemed a special called meeting, it does not have to occur at 6 p.m.
I mean, if we
That's
put
what
it
I was
off
just
and
gonna ask Preston, if we could have this like at 4 or 5 in the afternoon,
You could do it.
and be done with it, because it's not gonna take us very long,
Right. It's
since we've already heard it tonight.
If the meetings are on Monday or Thursday, they have to be no later than 4 o'clock.
Whitney, are you saying that the meeting, if we have a called meeting, it would have to be at 4 o'clock, or would have to be done by 4 o'clock?
That was Wendy.
It would have to be done by 5. I didn't know if one item was going to last more than an hour.
I can't imagine it even less than 30 minutes, honestly.
But again, we're hanging this on Commissioner Pavlich availability, and he's not here right now.
If it's worth anything, I understand Commissioner May's perspective, and I would be comfortable given Alan's information that the 500,000 would take care of anything that would need to be done in order for us to approve it for me. I'd be willing to go ahead and vote tonight.
All right, I'm not hearing consensus about next week. So since we do have a motion and a second on the floor, is there additional discussion about it?
Can I, Madam Chair, if I could just add one little bit of information, which Commissioner Mays actually already mentioned. I know, well, Whitney and I discussed earlier today exactly what you all are discussing right now, wondering whether or not this was going to be the conversation. And so we applaud you for having this conversation, thinking about precedents, thinking about how important it is that you protect your subdivision regulations. You're doing the right thing by protecting your subregs. However, in this particular case, and based on information you've received from the city engineer, he and we in the planning department feel a level of comfort based on literally something as simple as physically seeing paving equipment staged on site, ready to go. But back to the clarification that I was going to make based on what Commissioner Mays has already said, your decision tonight, if you choose to vary your subregs, is not precedent setting. It may feel that way politically, but it is not legally precedent setting. You would have no obligation whatsoever to apply this decision to anyone in the future ever.
Let's call a question.
All right, we have a request to go ahead and call the vote. Nicole?
Before I call the vote, let me clarify the motion that's being made. I have to, the motion is to approve both sections with a variance from, and I quoted the part of the subregs, with a $500,000 bond with the ability of staff to reduce the bond if work is completed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I don't know that that's, we can tweak reword it
Yeah.
to match what Public Works has said as far as the number goes, but yes,
Right.
that is correct.
Okay, just wanted to verify, and that's,
Somebody said, clean that up.
I will clean that up.
The lawyer in me is dying.
So it's a motion by Mays with a second. Was it Commissioner Hickson that made the second?
I think I did.
Can I get a clarification?
Okay, gotcha.
Just because I don't know if it's needed, do you need to also include the addressing and pins in the motion, or?
Yes.
Because those apply to either which way you went.
Right.
And placing,
Approval of street names by addressing, and the pins are the pins may be included because they're already bonded.
They are included in the bond, but our ask was that they be installed prior to recordation.
Okay.
And the
Installed
bond
prior to recordation.
be reduced.
installation of pins.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because the other part of that is that 911 did not approve Cove Drive as a name. And so the names still need to technically be approved on the plat.
Okay, so you ready for me to call roll?
So
Yes.
moved.
Okay. Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Okay, motion approved as what I stated.
Oh,
she
come on, you
said.
gotta state it again, Nicole.
Oh,
She said,
sure.
Well,
Okay.
no, actually, Madam Chair, out of all seriousness, what we will do is Nicole and I and Whitney will make sure that the motion is written in the way that we believe it to be stated, and then email it to you and to Commissioner Mays for clarification to make sure that that is accurate. Can we do that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Big Mouth Billy Bass has finished playing in the background of my house now. Sorry, he is motion detected at this time of year. All right, we are going to move on to the next item under new business then, and it is a final replat. It is a request to approve Youngs Valley Business Park.
I'm gonna share my screen again. I feel like y'all go away when this happens. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm gonna put it into flat show mode, maybe. There we go. So this is a final replat. What essentially, just to give you a location, it's Boone Station Road and old, not Boone Station, Boone's Creek Road and Gray Station Road. It's on that corner where I believe there's an O'Reilly's across the street. So it's zoned before. We're kind of going to go through this. What their request is this is the original plat, where you see this transportation easement outlined here. Due to some grading that they did on the property to create the lots, they can't necessarily build this transportation easement the way that it is. So they are proposing to change the transportation easement. That's really the crux of this request. No lot lines are changing, nothing like that. They just need to change the internal access to, I think my pointer. One, what you'll notice is that this access doesn't go all the way through as it does before. It stops right here, which is okay. And that it comes across the front instead. Now, this is also one that has some comments that need to be cleaned up. They're, I'm not going to say minor, but doable. I believe the engineer is probably going to call in because he, from speaking or from some emails interchanged this afternoon, it sounds like it's pretty easy and doable and that type of thing. But these are the markups from engineering. I'm just going to scroll through this unless y'all want to go back to them. But just to kind of see like how this occurred. And this is the one that's really telling. Like this is where that gravel is right here. It's kind of where that road would need to be. And so this grade change is really why you can't do the transportation easement. So in your staff report, it said approval, but I believe the way I need to write this, and this is just my newness to the nuances of Tennessee, is that it's conditional approval with these three things. They're very simple, just kind of some things to tighten up on the plat. So that's all I have. I try to make these short and sweet. So if you have any questions of me or of engineering or of water and sewer, please ask away.
Whitney, what is a transportation easement?
It's an access easement.
Okay, and can you go back a slide, 2 slides maybe, please? Nope, keep going. Go back again. Okay, if I'm looking at this, I see the stormwater management easement that would be going across the back of the lots, and now the transportation easement going across the front of the lot. How is that going to affect the buildable area of those 2 lots? Because it seems to me there's quite a bit of those lots that are now covered by easements, or am I misunderstanding?
No, I think that was one of the comments from Stormwater. So Travis, are you still here? I can't see anyone anymore.
Travis is not, and really Stormwater would be under Public Works.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. No, that's okay. And actually that stormwater management easement, my understanding, if you go back to the original plat, that stormwater management easement has been added as part of this change. Yes.
Is the engineering that's been done for that corner lot has already identified where their detention system will be. And our water quality ordinance allows them to utilize their detention system for the treatment of the water that would leave the site also. So it's a combination water quality basin and detention basin. Our ordinance requires that they put a easement around the water quality, and that's why that's being shown on the plat, and that's in the back area of the building. The 2013 plat of this property had a series of transportation easements to allow interconnectivity between all the lots that were created on this original big tract, which was a farm, family-owned thing. And at that time, we were still coming out of the difficulties of the recession. And normally you would have required the developer to build some public streets in here to connect all these lots. But back in 2013, there was an interest in allowing the lots to be created if we could come up with a reasonable transportation system of easements that would provide that connectivity rather than a public street. The objective is not to have these individual lots having individual driveways, having numerous driveways up and down the Boones Creek Road with a lot of traffic going through these separate driveways, but to have shared driveways and fewer of them and have them connected with these easements. The developer preferred at that time to have these easements along the back property line and up and down the interior sidelines. A lot of earthwork took place on the 2 lots that are to the right of the subdivision plat. That's made it hard to utilize the easement that's actually there. So they're asking to eliminate that easement on the back property line, which is the bottom property line on your picture. And where we would allow them to terminate it is where it's shown in this picture, allows a lot outside of this Re-Plat to still have access to that 40-foot easement. The rest of the way across there is a common owner. The 2 right-hand lots and the big lot below is a common owner. The lot that the cursor was just on is a interested party that needs that 40-foot easement to stay right there. That where the cursor was just at, that party needs that 40-foot easement to stay. To the right of that, the big parcel to the right, that is common ownership with the 2 upper parcels on the right. And that owner has done a lot of earthwork on his property, and it's making it not feasible for that 40-foot easement, which actually continues across all 4 of those lots. So if we eliminate that back easement, we need it to be replaced. And the little narrower easement on the front, to answer your question about utilization of property, we've tried to put that where their parking lot aisle would be. If you have parking that points towards the Boots Creek Road and also points towards a future building, that easement would be roughly where the parking lot aisle would be between the parking that would be put out front. That can also be changed if it doesn't completely fit. It can be moved a little bit with another replat, but we've tried our best to put it where it makes sense. And so those lots that are connected with that 24-foot wide one is, we're not really causing them to lose any usable space because it's where the parking lot aisle would be.
So are we looking at the final replat?
What you see on this screen is the requested replat.
Okay.
The first page of the plat shows the existing conditions of the easements and so forth.
And at least initially,
the page you're looking at is what they're requesting permission to go to. And we've worked out the changes and we're satisfied that we still accomplish the interconnectivity with this, even though we're going from a 40-foot easement to a 24-foot easement. The 40-foot easement was along the rear and shared between the property outside of this replat and the property in the replat.
okay.
We've made sure the property outside still has access to an easement.
I understand the easement. My question is, with 2 easements on those lots now, and particularly on that 3rd lot, how does that affect the buildable space on that lot? It seems like you've eliminated almost half of the lot for any type of structure. Because you can't go in front of that transportation easement, you can't put anything significant behind the stormwater easement. So it seems to me the only place you could put any building. No, go over 2 more lots.
This one.
No,
This
next
one.
that one, yes. It seems like the only place you could put any building would be between that transportation easement and that stormwater easement. Is the building space still sufficient for whatever the needs were going to be? That's my question.
Yes.
That's a significant piece of property between the 2 easements. On this drawing, it looks small because of the scale, but that is significant. And the easement that's parallel to the yellow easement, the easement in the back, that's sanitary sewer easement. And the transportation easement is highlighted in yellow.
Also, keep in mind, Chairwoman, that this proposal is not being done to that property owner. That's Mr. Summers, and he has been a part of this entire process.
Okay,
He's well aware of all this. He was a part of the application. He has to sign the plat.
That's fine. I just wanted, it just looks very small to me from this view. It looks like we've eliminated more than half of his buildable space.
Right, no ma'am.
Alan, I have a question. The property, the lot that you just referred to, where the transportation easement cuts across the top of it, and at the right end where the cursor is that indicating that there's an outlet onto Boones Creek Road there, or there would be an outlet onto Boones Creek Road?
There would be an outlet there. There may be some current, what I call field entrances that are narrow curb cuts that go into the vacant property. So that may not line up with one of those existing curb cuts, but that is a curb cut proposed. And the 2013 replat that started all these lots, that matches with the location of a driveway that was allowed in the 2013 plat. So that position did not move, but the access to that spot has changed by the way the easements are configured to move over there to get out.
But we would be now talking about 2 access points on Boones Creek Road, at least 2 access easements on Boones Creek Road.
Yes, those 2 access easements are in conformance with the 2013 plat, where a lot of debate went into how many access easements you could have on this side of the road. And those 2 points were agreed upon then. Now, we've asked them to move the left-hand access, and that's why it's slanted. You see that yellow is slanted a little bit. It doesn't go parallel. That moved over some so that the deceleration lane that's going to be built between the corner and turning in there will be longer. And the 2013 plat required that entrance be a right in, right out only. The other entrance that you asked me about will be a full access easement. You can go left in, left out, but the one on the left side that the cursor was there, that one is a right in, right only, right in, right out. And you don't have the site plan before you. We've been looking at the site plan, and they show us the splitter island already in the drawings that would prohibit the left turn.
And there's a site plan for this lot
Correct.
already.
So are there going to be deceleration lanes for both access points?
Yes, there'll be a deceleration lane for all of the access points. And these are the 2 that are on this side of the road. And the 2013 plat involved lots on the opposite side of the road too. And all of those on that side have decel lanes. And this was all done as a one development at the time. Now we're looking at a portion of that bigger development and replatting these 4 lots and moving the transportation easements around a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
But we're not moving the access points other than that slight movement right there.
The other thing that I think is important to note, and it really is just a reiteration of something that Whitney's already mentioned. As part of this replat, there are no proposed lot line changes. Typically, a replat is an administrative decision. Normally, this kind of plat is approved in-house. But we wanted to bring this to you, or I should go so far as to say it was suggested by legal that we bring this to you because the 2013 plat has Regional Planning Commission all over it, and has conditions that were specified, and the easement, the granting of those transportation easements were specified by the RPC at the time. So that 2013 plat, as Alan noted, which carved up a even much larger chunk of the Young's farm. I noted that it was a little unusual how much it stated Regional Planning Commission all throughout the plat and even in the notes. So when we suggested to legal, this is normally an administrative decision, they said, it is our advice that you get this back in front of the Planning Commission, even if you're just moving the easements around. But there are no lot line changes proposed as part of this.
Okay, are there additional questions of staff? All right, do we need to open a public hearing for this matter?
Public comment.
Oh, public comment. Yes.
Public comment, okay. If we could, Wendy, please display the phone number and information should there be anybody in the public listening that wishes to comment on this matter, and we can continue discussion while we give the public a few minutes to call in.
As Whitney noted, I do know the engineer is watching, whether or not he chooses to call in, but he has, he's been very accommodating and has worked with us through this process, even up till today when these minor notes and changes were requested by engineering.
Okay, is it safe to assume we have no callers on the line, Wendy?
No, ma'am.
Okay, let's go ahead and close the public comment. And at this time, if there's no further discussion, I am looking for a motion on this matter.
Could I ask Whitney to please put back up the considerations?
Yes.
I just want to be able to refer to them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, let me see if I can get it all together.
Miss Hodges has earned about a fifth of her salary tonight, I think.
All right, Commissioner Dagan.
This is no time. Huntersville meetings would last a very long time.
No, I didn't have any question, but I'll make a motion that we approve this rerouting of the transportation easement on the Youngs Valley Business Park property, considering the conditional approval elements shown on the screen in front of me.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion for approval with the conditions shown by Commissioner Dagenhart, a second. Who seconded? Is
Me.
it Brett or Clay?
Brett.
Okay, sorry. I was listening, but I didn't have your face before me. All right, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Nicole, would you please call the roll?
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved as presented.
All right, our next item under new business is a bond reduction request to reduce the $72,000 bond for the village at Beechwood Meadows, Phase 1, Section 3 subdivision. Is this a Matt or a Whitney or a Preston?
No, this is a Preston, and I apologize. I'm going to simply share my screen, which is the, there we go. Can everybody see the agenda summary on the screen? This is Village at Beechwood Meadows, Phase 1, Section 3. This is actually a, I wouldn't call it an older subdivision, but one that normally we would be having this kind of conversation with a new subdivision. But this is one where Mr. Gary Phillips originally developed this subdivision, and then it was purchased, or at least this particular section was purchased by Orth Construction, and they finished it.
Hey, Preston, I'm sorry. I actually am involved in this litigation result regarding this issue. I'm sorry. So I may need to, I don't know if I can be here during this comment, or it is the normal practice for me to leave during the discussion part of it as well.
Well, no, that's an excellent question. It's technically QJ, so, or quasi judicial. What I would recommend is that you mute and turn off your video. I wouldn't disconnect from the call, but I would just mute and turn off your video.
Okay, will do.
Preston, this is Commissioner Whitfield. Are we still going to have a quorum without Commissioner
We
Hayes?
still have quorum, do we not? We have one.
Yes, we still have 6.
Okay, yeah, I was having to count squares there. Thank you, Matt. And so Mr. Phillips originally developed Village of Beechwood Meadows. Orth Construction purchased Phase 1, Section 3, and then completed it. There was a separate bond associated with Mr. Phillips, and so he finished his work, or what was able to be completed, And then I believe that other bond was released. And then Orth had a separate bond, and that's this $72,000 bond, of which he is asking for a reduction. And so Public Works Engineering has submitted an approval to reduce that 72,000 down to 39,000. And so they are continuing to wrap up work out there on Section 3 with some paving issues and some pedestrian connection items, et cetera, et cetera. But the recommendation is to reduce it from 72 down to 39,000.
Okay. Alan, do you have anything further to share with us on this?
We prepared the estimate. It includes a multi-purpose path that connects this an older section of the subdivision with this newer section. It's a wide concrete sidewalk. It includes some repair to the roadway, some handicap ramps that weren't finished, and then it all totals out to 39,000. We're comfortable that that's an adequate bond for the unfinished work in this subdivision. So we can go along with recommendation for approval.
All right, thank you. Okay, does anybody have additional questions of either engineering or staff at this time? Okay, do we need to open a public comment on a bond reduction hearing?
You do not.
Okay. All right, then. Chris, if you're talking, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I move we reduce the bond to 39,000 from the 72,000 existing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Degenhardt, a second by Commissioner Hickson to support the bond reduction request from $72,000 to $39,000 for the Village at Beechwood Meadows Phase 1, Section 3. Is there any further discussion? All right, Nicole, would you please call the roll then?
Sorry. All right. Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Degenhardt,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved as stated.
Okay. And Clay, are you trying to say something? Because you're muted.
That was a conversation with the family. Sorry.
Okay, all right, that was fine. I just saw the mouth moving.
Multitasking.
I'll quit looking at y'all. All right, we're going to revisit what was item 6.1 under new business that we moved to the bottom of our new business agenda, and that was our discussion about the language for the MX1 mixed-use neighborhood district that Matt Manley presented so kindly hours ago. And on his last night, we're making him sit here to revisit. So I know that Matt did a presentation on this already, but we had saved discussion until this point in our agenda. So I will open the floor now for said discussion.
Preston, you have the same version in your email. If you want to share it on the screen.
I will be happy to.
Thank you. And then one thing that I wanted to point out that I was answering Dr. Whitfield's question and then failed to point out the provision related to stormwater that I mentioned. And if Preston can bring that up, I believe it is 6.25.5.4A3.
Okay, so I'm using the viewer model or the viewer option on my screen. Is everyone able to see this, or is it kind of fouling up on folks' screens?
No, we can see it.
Okay, so Matt, can you see the 6.25543 an overall drainage plan?
Yes. Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out. I can't quite
You want me to highlight it?
read it.
I
I
can-
have some, there we go. Yeah, an overall drainage plan with sufficient detail to demonstrate orderly collection and disposal of stormwater from the development site, taking into account the impact that any discharge will have on downstream properties. The quality of stormwater discharge must be acceptable as regulated by state and federal agencies. That is under the requirements for the comprehensive development plan.
Hello, Matt?
Yep.
Can you give the section number again, Mr. Manley?
6.25.5.4A3.
So
that is quite a lengthy reference, but that addresses the stormwater that I said it was addressed earlier in relation to us striking the impervious surface limitation. And so I wanted to direct you to that reference so that you would know that they still have to control stormwater up to standards.
Thank you.
Okay. Other than that, the only other clarification that is not reflected 100% is where modification was made to I'm sorry. Can y'all still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
For some reason, there we go.
Crystal clear.
Sorry, just having a little technical difficulty on my end. Under the parking requirements, item F, we would need to go back in and add the original text and strike it through, and then keep what's shown there, 6.25.2.4 as the reference to the commercial uses, which would receive the reduction to 75% of the number required in our parking ordinance. That's the way it should read. So all of the intent and new language is shown. We just, I deleted out the current language that would need to be shown as read and with the strike through. And other than that, I'll open it up for discussion for the commissioners. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and also open the public hearing while we have our discussion, just to give an opportunity for anybody who wants to call in. So if we could display that phone number for a few minutes.
Yes, let me stop sharing. So
Wendy, could you put up the information for the public hearing, please?
Wendy?
Preston, it's also at the bottom of the Word document.
Yeah, you could go back to the document you were displaying, Preston. It was on that last. There we go. Okay. And now we can continue our discussion while we keep the public hearing open, and Wendy will let us know if somebody calls in. So, I will say again, there was a very lengthy and good discussion amongst the Legislative Review Commission members the other day when this was presented to us. And I think after voting on the rezoning of MX1 this evening, it shows exactly the potential of how this can be used. And so that was the light that we considered it in that subcommittee meeting. in reference to that neighborhood and what types of things we'd like to see. Are there other comments from commissioners?
I've got two questions, Madam Chairman.
Sure.
One, under permitted uses, are daycare centers, as we've recently revised the definition, are they allowed on the first floor in mixed use? MX1?
Yes.
Yes, I believe we put daycare, well, however we redefine the language for daycare centers.
Yeah, there's no further restriction as to any kind of floor. They would have to meet all the licensing requirements for the state, which has provisions for square footage per child, outdoor play space per child, enclosure requirements, number of teachers or adults per children. So part of what we did was just kind of defer to the state and get out of the way to reduce the overall bureaucratic burden of thus impacting daycares and causing undersupply.
Okay, thank you. The other question is under approval process, back to that 6.25.5.4 and paragraph 1. Is the wording correct in the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, I think it's the third sentence. If there has been no rezoning or concept plan approved by the city commission, only staff review and approval is required?
That's correct. So if a rezoning is involved and a concept plan is required as part of the rezoning, then that concept plan will guide the development. If there is no rezoning, let's say the parcel that's currently zoned MX1 at the corner of Whitney and Highland.
Okay.
They would still be required to do a comprehensive development plan. And that would be reviewed by staff rather than by the commission because there's no rezoning attached to it.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Wendy, has anybody called in?
No, ma'am.
Okay, let's go ahead and officially close the public hearing then. Is there additional discussion amongst commissioners?
Madam Chair, can I, if it's okay, we did receive, Matt and I both received an email during the meeting tonight. Apparently there was a neighbor living in that area that attempted to call in and they might have had some difficulties. So she sent an email and if you would like, I'm happy to read the email.
Yes, please, let's read that into the public record.
Okay. And just so she knows if she's listening and having difficulties calling in, regardless of any vote tonight by the Planning Commission, there are other opportunities to speak in front of the City Commission as well. And so it's important to note that opportunities for public engagement are certainly not over. So she noted, she said, "Hi, Mr. Manley. I attempted to call into the public hearing during the Planning Commission meeting, but did not get through before comment period closed. I live on Highland Avenue on a neighborhood block to the area of proposed rezoning in the Mountain Home neighborhood. I was not aware of the architectural standards as part of the proposed rezoning. In the examples of pictures during your presentation, I noticed the house of a friend and neighbor of mine who rents on Highland Avenue. The home was used as an example of a home that would not meet the architectural standards of homes on other blocks of the neighborhood. My question is, what will happen to the homes that do not meet that standard where people are currently living? I am concerned that families and individuals will be displaced out of housing because of these standards. The people who live in this neighborhood are just as worthy of access to Founders Park, views of Buffalo Mountain, and other perks that the commission sees as valuable. I hope this rezoning is not a precedent for gentrification and displacement. Thank you for your attention to this question.
Okay, do you all want to go ahead and address that question too, Matt, or?
Yeah, I mean, the references to the multi-family vinyl siding, brown vinyl siding. I think it's 2 duplexes side by side that are facing in towards each other, not towards the street. It was on the left of the presentation slide that it was shown on. No, nothing would happen to exist. That parcel in particular is not being rezoned. It is outside the area that's rezoned. Even if it was, or any properties that are within the area being rezoned would all remain the same. They would be grandfathered in. They, if there's any, aspect that is non-conforming, it would be considered legal non-conforming. There is no, active enforcement to, force property owners to bring properties up to be compliant with current zoning.
Nothing retroactive.
Correct.
Right, not retroactively. There's a whole provision in our zoning code for legal non-conforming structures and uses. And so there would be nothing to that effect. The current structures as they stand could then be used in ways that are outlined in the MX1 zoning as we're being discussed. If a new structure was to be built, it would have to conform to that zoning as well. And so that's where the architectural standard would come in, is when something new was being built or an existing structure was being significantly rehabilitated beyond a point of 50% of the total replacement cost. Then a major rehabilitation project could potentially trigger the architectural review, but it would have to be a significant redevelopment and keeping portions of a structure intact and rebuilding it for that to kick in.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for clarifying that for her. And I hope that individual did have an opportunity to continue listening, or perhaps we'll be able to review this to get the answer to that question. Would it be appropriate, since she emailed in the question, for you all to answer that question via email as well?
Sure, we'll be happy to.
I think that would be appropriate to allay any fears that she has, and that would certainly signify too that we did listen to that question and address it. So I'd appreciate that, please.
The point about gentrification is a really important one. That should always be at the forefront of discussions about revitalizing a neighborhood or potential redevelopment of an area. And so as planners, we are sensitive to that, and we have to balance that with creating places that have high quality of life, that are safe and attractive, while also trying to make sure we're sensitive to the needs of affordable housing. The idea of that, the MX1 has, a density associated with it, just like the current R4. And that density alone, it opens an opportunity for additional housing and additional units. And the more housing stock we have in our community, the greater likelihood we have of producing market rate affordable housing, and not just simply relying on subsidized housing. And it's, and as I mentioned early in the presentation, we can't, as a city, require affordable housing as part of a new development. And so that's a tool that is taken away from us and limits our ability to actively address gentrification as part of any of these types of developments. But I just don't, I want to make it clear that that's not, that's something that is not considered. It's always at the forefront of our thoughts as planners when we're balancing the types of potential solutions to problems that we're addressing on a daily basis.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Okay, is there any additional discussion on this topic then? Hearing none, I am looking for a motion because I don't think we've voted on this yet. We're back to our revision of Article 2, definitions, and Article 6, use requirements by district in the City of Johnson City zoning ordinance as it relates to MX1.
I will move that we accept and vote on and accept the revisions to Article 2 definitions and Article 6 use requirements by district in the City of Johnson City zoning ordinance related to MX1's definition.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Dagenhart, a second by Commissioner Cooper for approval as presented. Is there additional discussion? Hearing none, Nicole, would you please call the roll?
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, that concludes our new business of the evening. We're going to move on to other. The first item is Planning Commission Subcommittee reports. All three subcommittees have met since our last meeting. I'm going to allow Commissioner Dagenhart to share anything regarding the Long Range Planning Committee, which is serving as our Bridge Plan Committee at the moment. The other two committees that met, the Legislative and what's the name of the other one?
Land use.
Land use, thank you. It's getting late. We've addressed both of those items in this evening's presentation. So, Chris, you're on.
Well, I'll make this relatively brief and I will make this a little flashy because I have some show and tells. If you'll let me share my screen and I'll talk a minute first. Let's see. I'll hold that off for just a second. Thanks to the committee, Jamie, Clay, Stacy, and myself, with the very generous leadership from Matt, we have processed through the comprehensive plan in its entirety, and we have developed the contents of a bridge plan for the obvious reasons that we talked about in detail. One of the things that we're doing is we're going through a process of handing over to Kelly Duggan, another contract part-time city planner who resides in Knoxville, but who has her home originally was in Johnson City. So she's familiar with it. She is in the process of polishing the document for use in a review, which I think it will be scheduled on January 12th in a workshop for the Planning Commission to consider, to review, and to hopefully approve the bridge plan. So that will be another big milestone for us. I've got to get to a document. If you'll just be patient with me for just a second.
I'll just clarify while you're looking for that, we did workshop this in November. And so the content has been presented, the formatted and revamped, polished look of the document will be what's new. And we had originally had aimed to present it tonight, but there's a 30-day public notice requirement, and that's by state statute, and we had missed that deadline, so it moved to January, which ends up working well with the timeline that the city commission's on for reviewing this, so it's okay. But there was a workshop in November, and that's typical. Do a workshop, thoroughly review it, provide opportunities for input and discussion from the Planning Commission, and then at the next meeting or a subsequent meeting, have the vote. And so that's what January would be. It would be on the agenda for new business. And that's what I would propose. It's up to you guys how you want to move forward, but a workshop may not be necessary. But I'll leave that up to the committee to decide.
Matt, have you been able to arrange for the notice to be published? Matt, are you still there?
Matt, you're muted.
It goes out tomorrow. It'll be prepared to go out tomorrow and would be published at the end of this week in advance of the January 12th meeting.
That's right.
Another notice would need to go out for the city commission. We just don't know the date of that first reading, but we need 30 days.
There's more information in my report about this, our involvement with the city commission, but can you see my screen?
No.
I cannot.
No. Okay.
Wendy, do you have permissions to share screens turned on for Commissioner Dagenham?
While Chris is doing that, is the Planning Commission going to get an early copy for us to look at before January?
Yeah, I can have it distributed to you as soon as it gets into our hands.
Great.
And I think there's going to be kind of an executive summary that has introductions for each element and covers, and I think Chris is trying to share an example of that. I think that'll be pulled together earlier and will be a good kind of overview of the document. And then the extra details would come certainly in your packet a week in advance of that January meeting, but if not sooner. So
it's a big document.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a big document, so I'd like to have it more than a week ahead of time.
Well, what we are proposing to put together for review purposes is a slimmed down document that has a very detailed background section that describes the goals and objectives for the element, that actually gets into the details of the elements. And actually it would be dressed up so that it would be more user friendly to review, and you wouldn't have to necessarily read every word of every element, although you would be welcome to do that and it would be available to you.
Okay, good.
Wendy, are you there?
We can see your screen now, Chris.
You can see my screen. Your Google preview.
Okay, great. Well, this is a format that we chose last week, and Kelly's in the process of producing content that will be much easier and more enjoyable to read and review. One of the elements that we've adjusted recently is in every element's background discussion and in the policy statements, we're making specific reference to the city's new strategy plan. And we're actually engaging in a policy statement to say that the bridge plan indicates an intention to follow and act according to the strategy plan in tandem.
Chris, can you scroll back up to the previous page? Just quickly. Okay, yeah, this is like a summary, a one-page summary with the key points and topics and proposed modifications and I think what's the other box? Goals and objectives, maybe. Yeah, goals and objectives.
This is that one-page summary. If you want to get a taste of what's changed about it, what's important about it, what's emphasized within it, and the goals and objectives of it, you can go to this one page and actually do a quick review, and then you'll be able to actually then drop down into the detailed document if you want to actually read the contents, which is a very dry document. Okay, let me go back to another document if you wouldn't mind. I'm switching between screens. Oops, can't share it yet. we have part of some of the content that's going to be embedded in the introductory part of the whole bridge plan. One thing will be the connect points with all the partner organizations that we have engaged with throughout the whole summer and fall in doing the review and the editorial changes to the bridge plan to create and produce the bridge plan, and making sure that that reference point, all those points of contact are easy to access in the bridge plan final report. And then the other piece of the puzzle that I'm going to share with you is, and this is in very rough form. Can you see this document?
Not yet. Now we can.
Our committee took the effort to take Johnson City's strategy plan and the 4 high-level elements of the strategy plan and the 8 elements of the comprehensive bridge plan and map where they overlap or connect with each other. And every one of these cells where there's a yes or where there's a Y means there's a direct connection between the element in the strategy plan and the bridge plan. So these two documents complement and support each other, one at a pretty high level and the other at a very detailed activity and policy specific level. So that's going to be called out in the background and introduction to the new bridge plan as it's being produced.
And so in those those places where we interface or connect have been vetted that we're basically on the same page in each case.
Well, having spent enough, I think our whole committee understands what's in the details of the element, and the strategy plan is fairly brief and high level. So it's pretty easy to see where they connect with each other. The strategy plan is very light on very specific activities and actions to be taken. It talks more about principles and objectives for the city going forward, say for 2020, I think it's for 2020 through 2025, which also matches up with the time frame for our comprehensive bridge plan. So it's pretty easy to see that they support each other, and I have not been able to detect a single element where there's any specific conflict.
Okay. I understand that there's a more detailed backup to the commission's strategic plan. Is that your understanding, Chris?
No.
That is not my understanding. I understand exactly the opposite.
And Chris and I did have a conversation with Mayor Brock the other day, specifically addressing the alignment of the strategic plan with the bridge plan and expressing our concerns that we want to make sure we are on the same page. And as she explained it to us, the strategic plan is very intentionally high level. It does not give specifics or anything. It's really to be used more as a guidepost for the city commission in their decision making as to where they should be focusing their efforts and where they should be advising expenditures of money. That she was looking towards the bridge plan or the comprehensive plan to get into the details of those items. At least that was what we
I'd also like to summarize some additional points from our conversation with Mayor Brock. First of all, she sends her apologies to the Planning Commission that she explained that on the city commissioner's role, it was an absolute oversight that we were not included in the work over the last year to develop the strategy plan. She apologized. She said it was a complete oversight and she took responsibility for that. She said she regretted that we were not at the table. They also have engaged with a collection of partner organizations to develop the strategy plan with consultant support to help do that. I told her that as far as I could see, I thought it was a very good effort, and I thought our efforts, while they might have not been connected, they were running in parallel. They are very much in complement to each other. Jenny explained that probably in late January, there will be a large workshop to look at the implementation of the strategy plan with all the partner organizations that the city commissioners have engaged with, and that the Regional Planning Commission will be invited to be part of that discussion. And at that point, and I've also offered to give Jenny and all the commissioners previews to what we have to present to help them understand how the two documents support and complement each other, that they're not in conflict and they can exist and do exist very gracefully next to each other. So in lieu of trying to get on their agenda with a 30-day notice to review the document of the bridge plan, the next logical step is to participate in the workshop, which is supposed to be scheduled, I think, either the third or fourth week of January, and engage and with the whole city commission and those bodies that have been party to developing the strategy plan. And then after that workshop, making an assessment when's the right time to take the bridge plan forward for the city commission's consideration to be adopted.
Is it
Stacy,
fair?
did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Bob.
No, that's all right. Chris, is it fair to assume that a lot of the same parties, if not all the same parties we have interfaced with, the commission's plan also is interfacing with?
I believe that all the commissions and parties that we interfaced with is a longer list than who the city interfaced with. The chamber, JCDA, Stacy, can you help me remember the ones that Jenny highlighted?
Whatever Pete refers to as the alphabet soup group.
But it was not, I think it was, I got the feeling it was probably 3 or 4 or 5 different bodies were part of helping to develop the strategy plan. And I think as the city commission understands the depth that we went to create those interfaces and those dialogues and those points of contact with all the organizations that have stakes in the elements that we are working through in the comprehensive plan, I think they'll appreciate that it's a much larger comprehensive audience that will actually be able to be networked to work on these things with having 2 sets of guides, one more of a principal guide and the other more of a tactical activity-based guide.
Great.
We also got the very specific support of the mayor, and her indication was she would certainly share her support with the rest of the commissioners, including the newest commissioner, regarding our efforts to become more strategic in nature as a commission. We had a very fruitful discussion about what our typical agenda items have looked at and the direction that we would like to see this board kind of move towards. And to that end, I have talked to Preston. We had hoped to have another retreat in December. That's not going to happen. Obviously, we've had some staff turnover and with the pandemic and everything. But I'm hoping to work with the staff in creating another mini type of retreat session for this commission. We want to wait until the new commissioners come on board. We are going to have a new city commissioner representative, as well as our understanding is that we may get our last spot filled as the Washington County representative soon. And in that next retreat, we certainly want to have broader discussions amongst the entire commission as to whether everybody's in agreement that we want to become more strategic in nature and go that direction, or do we want to remain more of just a transactional commission? Because I don't want to speak for everyone with my desire to go there. But I think that's
any other
we should discuss.
Wrap up or follow up questions about the bridge plan and where this is going, the timeline?
Thanks for your effort, Chris.
Well, my sincerest thanks to Matt, who have carried so much of this load and has done tremendous amounts of work. And he's going to be stepping away from it right when we get to take it across the finish line. But I'm very excited about getting to work with Kelly. Kelly's going to be phenomenal. She put together several template graphical design concepts and put before us, and the one I just showed you is the one we chose.
Well, thank you, Chris and Stacy and especially Matt for all you guys' hard work. It's really appreciated by the rest of the commission.
Absolutely.
One thing I would like to just mention, just for the record, for ourselves as commissioners, it was an eye-opening experience for me to go through this comprehensive plan in the detail that we would obviously have to go through to do the kind of editorial work that we've done. But it would be well worth your time to spend some time with the content of the material, especially if it's related to a specific subcommittee that you're on, like land use or legislation. But it's an eye-opening document, although it is quite a large volume. But it really helps get you grounded in what we have the potential to help create in the city of Johnson City. And it's an excellent roadmap. It is still timely, even though some of it's 10 and 15 years old.
All right, thank you, Chris. All right, Preston, do we have a discussion topic item for tonight's agenda?
Are you referencing a specific item that I'm missing, or
No, I'm asking if you have something in mind. Because usually when I'm ready to wrap it up, you say, wait a minute.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Based on you all have done some great hard work tonight, and that is to be applauded. So thank you for all that you all have done, and I appreciate all the staff that have hung in here for the meeting too.
All right. Well, I would be remiss before we end if we didn't give a huge shout out to Matt Manley and a huge thanks to all of his efforts with the Bridge Plan Committee most recently, but also with the Commission at large. We all sincerely wish you the very best in your next endeavor, Matt, but you're going to be missed here.
Here.
You're here. You're here.
Absolutely.
Also,
Hey,
a welcome aboard to Whitney. So.
Yes, she might have had to have stepped away. I think she was.
Oh, no, there she's there. She acknowledged. So.
Health.
Yeah.
No, I am very appreciative is not the right word. I'm excited that we were able to use the technology that we have. And, you know, unfortunately, COVID has forced a lot of the technology that we now use. That's become somewhat normal. But being able to tap into the talent and the skill set of both Whitney and Kelly, and to do that remotely, one being in Charlotte, one being in Knoxville, and essentially, and then they have access to our networks and access to our City View system. And for them to be able to literally just dive right in within a matter of weeks to our work, not only speaks to their talent and their skill set, but speaks to what we're able to do here in these crazy times. And so I am very excited about them being on board and their help and their ability to jump in when badly needed.
Yeah, well, many thanks, and thank you for finding them. Well, guys, I would, again, if this was a normal year, I'd be inviting everybody over for Christmas party, but maybe we could have a cocktail hour by Zoom together. But
any excuse for a cocktail.
Exactly. I do sincerely wish everybody the very happiest of holiday seasons. And I hope that we will have an opportunity to get together again soon, sometime in the near future.
Here, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
All right. Is there anything else on the agenda we've left off, Preston?
No, ma'am. I'm glad you made the remarks you made for Mr. Manley. We wish him the best. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to he and his growing family. He's just going to be right over that hill.
He has to keep in touch.
That's
All right. Well, then I am going to do it
Thank
myself.
you, guys. It's been great working with you, and I really appreciate all the kind words and wish you all the best of luck. There's a lot of great momentum going on with this commission and great things ahead. So thanks again, and definitely stay in touch. I appreciate it, and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Good luck to you.
All right, I'm going to make the motion to adjourn. I'm going to second it, and I'm going to vote for everybody. Night all.
Happy
Good night.
holidays, everybody. Merry
Bye.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.